There is a population on Earth where heart disease is almost unheard of, where diabetes barely exists, where researchers have spent decades looking for a single case of dementia and struggled to find one. They are not taking any medication for it. They are not following any special diet plan. They simply live the way humans lived before any of these diseases existed at all. They are called the Tsimane, an indigenous population in the Bolivian Amazon. And what researchers found when they finally studied them in detail may be the closest thing modern medicine has to a control group for the entire human experiment. In the early 2000s, an anthropologist named Michael Gervin and a cardiologist named Hilliard Kaplan began a long-term study of the Tsimane, a population of roughly 16,000 people living in forest villages along the Maniqui River, largely without electricity, processed food, or modern medical care. They expected to find some cardiovascular disease. Every population has some. What they found instead, published in a 2017 study in the Lancet, stunned the medical world. Using CT scans to directly measure arterial plaque, the gold standard for detecting heart disease, researchers found that 85% of Tsimane adults had completely clean arteries, zero plaque, not reduced risk. Zero. Among Tsimane in their 80s, nearly two-thirds still showed no signs of heart disease at all. For comparison, in the United States, the average American reaches that same level of arterial damage roughly by their mid-50s. The Tsimane had on average the vascular age of Americans 25 to 30 years younger than them. This was not a fluke, and it was not genetics. When Tsimane individuals moved closer to towns and adopted more processed food and less physical activity, their heart disease rates began climbing toward typical modern numbers within a single generation. But heart disease was only the beginning of what researchers found. A separate team, led by neurologist Irimia, examined brain scans of aging Tsimane adults, expecting the same pattern of brain shrinkage seen in aging populations everywhere else. Brain volume naturally decreases with age. It is one of the most consistent findings in all of neuroscience. Except among the Tsimane, that decline was happening 70% slower than in industrialized populations. 70%. Their brains were, in effect, aging at less than a third of the rate researchers expected. Dementia, one of the defining fears of modern old age, appeared to be almost entirely absent among Tsimane elders, despite most of them living into their 70s, 80s, and beyond without any formal medical care at all. Researchers were careful here. This was not a population without hardship. Infant mortality among the Tsimane is significantly higher than in wealthy nations. Parasitic infections are extremely common, with most Tsimane adults carrying some degree of chronic infection for most of their lives. And this is where the story gets genuinely strange, because that fact was supposed to make things worse, not better. Chronic inflammation, driven partly by ongoing infection, is one of the primary suspects behind modern cardiovascular disease and cognitive decline. By that logic, the Tsimane constantly fighting off parasites should have had worse heart and brain health, not better. Researchers now believe the answer lies in a concept called the hygiene hypothesis, combined with something more specific: an immune system in constant low-grade motion, rather than sitting idle. The Tsimane are almost never sedentary. Gervin's team measured their daily activity and found that Tsimane adults spend around 6 to 7 hours a day engaged in physical labor, hunting, fishing, farming, walking. Even Tsimane in their 70s remain more physically active on an average day than most Americans in their 20s. Their bodies are almost never at rest, and their immune systems are almost never idle either, constantly responding to a stream of small, manageable challenges rather than sitting dormant and then reacting explosively to modern triggers like ultra-processed food and chronic psychological stress. Their diet, roughly 70% complex carbohydrates from plantains, rice, and corn, alongside wild game and fish, contains almost no refined sugar and almost no industrially processed fat. Their fiber intake is estimated to be several times higher than the average Americans. None of this is exotic. None of it involves a supplement, a specific superfood, or an expensive intervention. It is, almost boringly, just how humans lived for most of our history as a species. The Tsimane are not alone. Researchers studying the Hadza of Tanzania, the Kedavans of Papua New Guinea, and several populations in rural Okinawa before Western dietary habits arrived have found strikingly similar patterns. Low rates of hypertension, minimal type 2 diabetes, blood pressure that barely rises with age at all, a pattern so consistent among the Tsimane and Hadza that researchers now question whether rising blood pressure with age, something doctors in industrialized nations treat as an unavoidable fact of aging, might actually be an entirely modern phenomenon. That single idea should stop you. An entire category of disease, something billions of people are medicated for as simply the cost of getting older, may not be a natural consequence of aging at all. It may be a consequence of a specific way of living that has only existed for a few generations. So what happened? Why does this pattern disappear so quickly once populations move toward modern life? Researchers point to several forces arriving together, compounding each other. Ultra-processed food, engineered specifically to override normal appetite signals. Chronic, unrelenting psychological stress, without the resolution and recovery that acute physical stress once had. And a level of physical inactivity that has no precedent anywhere in human evolutionary history. Individually, each of these might be manageable. Together, arriving all at once in a single generation with no time for adaptation, they appear to overwhelm systems that evolved for a completely different set of daily demands. This is not a story about a magic population somewhere in the Amazon holding a secret modern science has failed to unlock. The Tsimane are not doing anything mysterious. They are doing what nearly every human on Earth did for hundreds of thousands of years, before the built environment changed faster than biology ever could. Here is the part almost nobody expects. Researchers studying the Tsimane are not concluding that modern medicine is useless, or that everyone should abandon cities and move into the Amazon. That is not the finding, and it was never the point. The finding is quieter, and in some ways more useful. It suggests that a meaningful portion of what we treat as the unavoidable cost of modern life, heart disease climbing through your 50s, blood pressure rising every decade, cognitive decline in old age, may not be inevitable at all. It may simply be what happens when an ancient, adaptable system meets a specific set of modern conditions it was never built to face. The Tsimane are, in effect, a living reminder that human biology has options. That the current trajectory of aging in wealthy nations, the one that feels so certain, so built into the definition of getting older, is not the only trajectory available to a human body. There is no simple takeaway here, no 5-step plan, no supplement stack that recreates life on the Manatee River inside a modern apartment. That was never the promise of this research. But somewhere in the Bolivian Amazon, there are people in their 80s with clean arteries and sharp minds, who have never taken a pill, never seen an MRI machine, and never once been told their body was supposed to slowly fall apart. Their bodies did not get the memo that aging has to look a certain way. And the more researchers study them, the harder it becomes to argue that the rest of us ever had to get it either.